Listeners, I'm here today with Isun, founder of M00-tion Architecture. Isun, you've had quite the journey from the research I've done, PhD in architecture, to founding M00-tion with leadership and keynote speaking along the way. How did all those threads come together? Was there a moment that really set you on this course that you're currently on?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be invited by yourself. And again, I think it's the first time we discussed this, but it's the first time that I'm speaking out on a media because I prefer to speak, since I've moved to the US, I prefer to speak with experts in the built environment, experts who have some experience in this field rather than, just general podcasts. So thank you so much for having me. It's definitely been a very challenging journey since I founded the studio, but I guess there were definitely certain phases in my life that ignited the sparks for founding my studio. I suppose the first one was doing my PhD. My PhD was an amazing opportunity for me. I worked with 4 international award-winning practices and around the world with Weissman Frady architects in New York, big architects in Denmark, and McGregor Coxau landscape architects in Australia, and another architect in Spain. And through that, I learned a lot about how different practices perform. And also, I was very keen to understand different design strategies. And that was when I started to understand what is the human experience of being in a designed precedent. So that was a very important stage in the history of my architectural, perhaps, education. And I guess after that, I was very determined to start up my own practice after working with these amazing architects. When I went back to Australia, I finished my PhD. And after that year, I started establishing or starting up my own business. I had a very eye-opening journey, personal journey back in 2018. It was after a very challenging personal experience. I was going through a very, very difficult personal relationship, and I was recovering from that. And I think that year was somehow my awakening year,
Right.
2018. I remember
And there's always a catalyst for that.
Exactly.
Right.
I was sitting at home almost, majority of that year, just doing a lot of meditation and also polishing my own architectural knowledge. And in that year, I felt like I'm assigned for a purpose. And I think since then, my life completely changed. My social life changed. I think my entire life has been sort of revolving around architecture. And it's been very challenging, very difficult, but also very satisfying because you get closer and closer to your purpose. So that was the beginning of the whole journey. And then I started up my firm in 2019. That was just a preparation. I was contracting for a few projects for government in Australia. I was also teaching at the same time. I have a history of teaching for about 8 years at different universities in Australia. So that I find myself a child of academia as well. I've also done many years of postgraduate studies, perhaps 12 or 13 years of higher education studies. So I studied leadership. When I was doing my PhD, I studied business management because I always knew that I want to start up my own business because of, my interest in my dad's business and how I always saw him as my role model. So when I started up my practice in 2019, I was faced with a lot of challenges, which I mainly find them coming from the politics of architecture in Australia. I mean, we can talk about it later, but basically the sparks of me starting up my practice back in Australia was, I think the main sparks were my PhD and also my personal journey with really finding out what my purpose is.
Right. What took you from Australia to New York?
Very good question. So when I started up my firm, I think I was also a part-time lecturer at university, and I had already developed some relationships with some of the projects that I was working on. And also, so I was in a good place, and they were mainly larger scale projects, which I was originally interested in. However, we hit COVID, And I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but we had the longest lockdown in the entire world in Melbourne. It was a very difficult situation. Our construction stopped for many months.
Yes. Apologize to interrupt, but what kind of intrigued me about you and why I reached out is I've been was in the construction industry,
Mm-hmm.
specifically in New York City and
Mm-hmm.
the surrounding boroughs for about 30 years. I've worked with a lot of
Mm-hmm.
different architects, and I saw that you were relatively new to the city and you had a different approach, and that intrigued me. It was difficult. One of our largest portfolios at the time was healthcare, so we had a lot of what they call deemed essential projects. So
Mm-hmm.
we worked straight through COVID. A lot of our other practices, like the corporate interiors and stuff, kind of died, obviously, right? But yeah, that's what kind of intrigued me when I saw
Yeah,
your
exactly.
LinkedIn.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was very challenging, but I wish my only challenge would have been COVID, because my main challenge was the system. I used to write a lot about, because I used to teach at university. I trained many, architecture students, many architects who are now, managers or leaders in a lot of the Australian architecture firms. I used to write a lot about sexism and about racism in Australia, and particularly about the situation with migrant architects in that country. It was a really strange situation. I had in 2020, at the very beginning of the lockdown, I started getting all these really strange letters from the Australian architecture system, making excuses as in why my practice is not a valid practice. Because I had some sort of familiarity with law, I haven't got any education, but I'm sort of familiar with the legal side of particularly architecture. I found it very strange, and I, consulted with a couple of attorneys, and they all mentioned that we're not really clear about this either. Those type of pushes continued on throughout lockdown, to the point that the last letter that I got from the system back in 2022, which was the breaking point for me, and that was when I decided that, you know what, after this many years of service to the community and to the practice of architecture, I feel absolutely disrespected and I have to leave the country. In that letter, which was a very serious legal letter, they had they had they had questioned my education, my experience, the years of my experience in terms of my academic experience and my practice experience, which was really, again, strange. But they put me in a very difficult situation where I had to fight constantly for the
Mhm.
very real, obvious position that I already had, and everyone was aware of, particularly in Australia. Everyone knew where I come from. Yeah, so like they really asked some very obvious questions. Thankfully, that was resolved without even me having to getting an attorney, just because I remember my friend who was an attorney mentioned that I said, maybe you should get an attorney. And I was like, no, why should I? Because this is a very obvious matter and everyone knows about me. Why don't you go and, Google my name or just go investigate about my background? I remember picking up the phone and speaking to a very important person at the governmental legal system. And I explained that, look, this is ridiculous. Just look up. And then it was so interesting that the government supported me way better than the architecture system in Australia. So
Yeah.
all the legal matter was resolved, but the fact that they didn't let me practice peacefully in that country and they kept, pushing me through different avenues was really disrespectful, because I have given a lot of services to that country through my research, through my teaching, through my practice. I, worked for a lot of projects for free for our business people. The COVID situation, as we spoke, and, the whole really difficult situation, particularly for us. In the US, it was way easier. But for us, we didn't have construction. The state of Victoria, for example, was in a lot of economical issues. So all of these problems and me really feeling hurt from, those instances of disrespect encouraged me to move. And my family were also, they live in Sydney. I was in Melbourne. They
Mhm.
were quite keen for me to move. Not that I have nothing against the Australian culture. I love Australia. I feel like I'm Persian, but, we lived in Australia with my family. And I always feel like and Australian people are lovely. I love them, very friendly. But I guess my main problem was the Australian architectural system. So anyhow, when I moved to New York, as you say, very challenging. It's been I think if I want to say which one was more challenging, it's difficult here. As we know, New York is tough.
New York
And
is an
particularly,
animal unto itself. It really is.
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
unlike any other place in the world.
very tough. And I
Yeah.
moved at the age of 38 when I already had established my own firm in another country. So for me, going and working as an employee for other practices, when I
Mhm.
was very big on leadership principles, management principles, and I was, always writing and critiquing, it was a bit of a difficult journey.
Right. Yeah. So other than the issues you had in Australia, was there a problem that you saw evolving within the industry or had been in the industry that you wanted to solve?
That's a very good question. I think it also leads us to the AI topic and the mindfulness that we spoke about. I could definitely see lack of progress in Australian architecture industry. A lot of the firms, we have a lot of good firms, not that they're not good. They do good projects, but I guess my critique was towards the use of technology, towards how we should, think and design more mindfully. My whole philosophy at Motion Studio was a boutique mindful architecture practice. And I mean, that was also coming from my experience of doing a PhD and understanding how human experience is so important. So human movement through the space, which is all about connecting mind and body, is so important, and it has to be considered in the design of our spaces. So I felt like we could do much better of our design approaches and design methods in that country. I also got a couple of government grants for developing this new technology for integrating AI with BIM, which is Building
No,
Information
I
Modeling.
know what it is. Yeah.
So that was a great opportunity. So I got grants for 2 years during COVID, which was very helpful. It was a challenging situation with our practice. So I got 2 grants, and the whole idea in those grants was about integrate real-time design modification using for architects when they're designing a space, having the user or the client next to them while, for example, they're wearing the goggles, and modifying the design real time. So they moved it through the space. They talk about their experiences of moving through the space. And then you sort of, based on that, you change, you modify the design. So it's a more mindful type of design process. And then I got a grant for developing a digital application for that, which I never got the chance to do after I moved. But that's still on the table for me to work on.
Right, right. Yeah, with AI, as we spoke, it's exploded. And I think professionals like architects and engineers, they have to be careful, right? You can't rely on AI to do any designs or calculations, right? So
Definitely.
we're in a period where, especially when it comes to design professionals like yourself and others in the industry, AI can be a great tool to assist and speed up and collect data, but it still can't come anywhere close for a basis of any design. And unfortunately, in the world we live in, I think you're going to find issues with that as we move forward, right? So it's a really good thing to be mindful of. It's an awesome tool. We're in an exciting time, but we have to be careful how AI is actually being used.
That's a very good point. And I just add something to that. That's such a good point. To be honest, I'm a big fan of technology, working on technology. But I guess as we said, the mindful side of things is really important. I've been talking to a couple of really, really good architects in New York, Handel architects, and I was listening to what they think of I mean, some of them agree, some of them don't necessarily. And shop architect, Greg from Shop Architect, who's a principal of the firm, and Tony from Handel Architects, they have different perspectives. And I would like to bring in, a couple of other perspectives. Some of the firms are keen to use AI, but I think everyone is on the same page that we don't want AI to decide for our design concept or design process or design method. We would like the architect and human to be in charge. What I see, the most helpful, in my opinion, is how we can use AI for laborious part of the design process, such as documentation, because then you can sort of review and it's going to be much easier. But, I've also heard from certain architects that they prefer not to use AI at all. And I somehow understand, because, the future that AI could lead us towards could be a little scary as well. So that's why we need to be very mindful.
Yeah, unfortunately, the people that are afraid of it and don't look to embrace it, unfortunately, are going to be left behind, because it is such a powerful tool. From what would take, numerous staff to research codes, especially in New York City, right? New York City codes are unlike many other codes. Like, it's not the same from city to city. To implore AI to be able to go in and give you the backup you need to make sure you're in compliance with codes, as just an example, is you could do as an owner of a firm in a tenth of a time that it would take someone else that is not open to AI. Not only would it take multiple staff members, it would take, a lot of time. And as we know,
Exactly.
time is money. AI, what's great about AI is, they don't need healthcare. They're not late to work. They don't take vacations, right? And they work 24/7.
Yeah, correct.
If you can put it within a framework, I always say, if I had to strike the perfect chord, it's the human interaction that we all strive to have, right? We want to speak to someone to solve an issue or brainstorm or
Very true.
whatever you have, but that relationship that a human has with AI is the perfect chord. AI can help you become faster, more efficient, which ultimately leads to more profitability. So as long as AI is managed by human, an owner of a business, that's actually the perfect chord you can strike with it. It can help you become faster, more agile, more efficient. And that's all great stuff for businesses. Defining wins. As you look back, what's one achievement or breakthrough that stands out to you that's especially meaningful for you? And what made it possible?
It's a very good question. I mean, I'm at a difficult stage in my architecture and leadership journey. So when you talk about wins, I think I am now on a bit of a not so very positive, situation, just because of a very recent experience that I've had at a developer firm, where I just, I was faced with a really shocking situation where I found out that an entire department of architecture has been directed by a 26-year-old girl with no architectural education, just because she's the daughter of the owner of the firm. So now I'm still, after a month or two, I'm still in a shock. So I can be that positive. And when you talk about wins, I think this was it was a very difficult and challenging situation for me to face with. And obviously I lost some time trying to really trying to help, but also trying to resolve this situation. And, I had to leave because of also the legal side of things, because then I found out that, apparently they don't even have a code compliance phase. So things were at a very bad place with this firm. So it wasted a lot of my time. And I think that's why it makes me a little bitter at the moment. But if I
but it's
look
those
at
experiences, though. It's those experiences
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
actually
I
make
think
you
if I
better.
want to see, that's very true. I think these are when you are in that moment, experiencing that, or around, that period of time, you feel a bit bitter. But I think you will find out later on that, that was really it was a valuable experience. I think my wins, I find my authenticity to be the biggest, and my reputation to be the biggest wins in the industry. I have always tried to be as authentic as possible in terms of my professional opinions. So I'm very direct and very straightforward with my opinions, and I feel responsible as a leader to speak up when I see something that's not okay, that's not right, such as code compliance, issues with design process, issues with the structure, issues with the ethics of a workplace, which I have seen a lot, obviously since I've moved. I think authenticity is one of my biggest wins, and also my reputation. I think, in my opinion, the biggest wealth that you can gather is your reputation. Because regardless of how much money you have, if you don't have a good reputation, if you can't gain people's trust, if you don't have community with you, your community with you. It's not going to be a very joyful journey, but I am really grateful from my community, from the community of architects and, in built environment and also other businesses, real estate as well, and my community on LinkedIn, basically, who are very supportive. They've supported me a lot. I mean, since I've moved here, I think I've received a lot of support, even, having a conversation, being able to share a story. I was invited at one of the firms, Handle Architects. They're one of the best firms. We were just sharing, and I was just sharing my story. The principal was just so generous with their time that they shared their projects and they shared the stories and how much, challenges they've gone through as well. So it was a really great opportunity it was really great. It was very motivating to hear that, someone else has gone through this number of challenges as well. So I guess my biggest wins are that just, being so confident of myself, that I have been true to myself and I've always spoken my truth. So I think that's my biggest win. And also the way people know industry is in a positive way. And I think my biggest wish is to be able to lead future and current generation of architects and also everyone in built environment or basically in business towards a leadership style where we all feel like we are all responsible and we all need to speak up when you see that something is not okay or something is not right. And I also would like particularly female business owners, female architects, or female, professionals to really fight for their own rights, because I guess, we hear a lot about gender equality. And we all know that it's not right, or at least I've experienced it in the hardest way. And it's
and
so not.
I think it becomes more prevalent in the construction industry, right? It's still
Very
got
true.
a lot of that
Very
old boys network, roll your sleeves
Very
up,
true.
get dirty type thing. So
Very true.
yeah,
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I always find to be very, very helpful is that, a lot of people might say that, oh, education doesn't matter. You can do whatever without any education. I disagree with that. I encourage particularly young female professionals to do as much education as they can. I think doing a PhD is a fantastic journey for their self-development, developing their identity as a professional, and also just self-education. I think that's really important.
yeah, no, that's great. So looking ahead, is something that excites you? Where do you see the next couple of years?
Again, it's a very interesting phase for me. I am positive. It's been an adventure in the US, particularly in New York. In the US, basically. I face a lot of challenges. I'm very positive. What I believe is that if I am on this path, I was meant to be on this path. I was assigned to be, on this path, and I was assigned to lead the people who were around me. I would like to, keep working on my architectural skills. I know that it's a never-ending journey, so I'm still a student in architecture and in leadership as well. I think I just turned 41 this last September. In this decade of my life, I would like to really focus on moving towards my ultimate typology of architecture, which is mostly about towers and high risers, and basically any type of architecture which has ethics and has a good design process in it. So that's where I see myself. And I think I definitely will keep collaborating and working with, the great firms who are, in the US and internationally as well. So that's where I see myself, I guess. But you can never know. My life has been very unpredictable. So I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm just open to
that's,
open
the
opportunities.
ups and downs. It builds character. It's a large part of who you are and who you'll become.
Exactly.
It's my personal opinion. You embrace those rocky roads and tough times and just persevere, right? It's just a never give up mentality is always going to succeed at the end.
That's very true. And it's very tough. You have to have the strategies to, particularly, I've been living by myself ever since obviously I moved, but even back in Australia, I used to be a super social person. But then, after I started my practice, things were pretty limited to very small number of hours for my social life.
Right.
But then you have to make sacrifices if you know that you're on this path. But also you need to look after yourself. For example, one of the things that I make sure that I don't skip is my fitness and my exercise routine. So I make
Yes.
sure that I stay healthy and that I live healthy. So I think these are the things that you need to do to be able to look after yourself and to be able to overcome all these challenges.
Yes, fitness, health is one of the biggest keys to, or slice of the pie to success, whether it's in business or personal. And you got to have successes in both to truly feel rewarded. So, where do you currently use AI? And then where do you see AI going?
Where I am in the process of hiring a digital application software engineer / application designer for developing this application that I've been working on in the past couple of years. So the idea is that through this application, you would be able to collaborate with a private client or a developer, whoever your client is, to be able to maneuver throughout the design process and polish the design as you go. But then the person who will decide about these modifications is the architect. And that's something that I always emphasize, that I don't necessarily agree with digital applications which are for everyone to use. I feel like, yes, it's good for you to explore, but it's the architect who needs to supervise that. Again, with all the possibilities that AI gives you, it's very confusing for a person who's not educated in architecture. It's really important that they are informed and supervised by an architect. And I mean, my ultimate aim is to create a platform where I can connect the architect with the client, as well as with the engineers and consultants, whoever is involved in the design process. So creating a platform where they could see real-time modification of the design. I know a very good practice in Boston, an architecture practice, who uses AI for really laborious processes. So as we talked about documentation, for example, which takes a lot of time of all of the practices, like let's say 30-40%. Again, some of the firms do not necessarily agree with this, but I am on a more positive side, on a more positive end of this spectrum. And I think that would be very helpful because it's going to save a lot of time and energy and money potentially.
Resources to where it's more beneficial, like the actual design. You're not spending those hours paperwork and documentation.
Exactly. I think one thing that for the design, I think AI is really helpful to create different options to give you, for example, to let you explore the options. However, I think the design decision-making phase should be, again, operated by the architect. I think AI is just good for creating options. But again, architects should be in charge. And I think that's really important because you need to have the control over AI. I think the scary thing comes when you let AI make a decision or take control. So I think that's really important. Exactly.
You're
And then the other...
right.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that I find a little... not helpful is how much AI is being used for visualization. We see all these, airy-fairy visualizations of spaces that never existed, will never exist. It can be helpful in certain, scenarios. For example, we've used it in our practice for creating different iteration of the renders or visualization for the same building to choose from, really, or material. But when they use it, it's really difficult to identify what is the reality and what is the render, and is it, the actual reality of how it is. With majority of cases, it's not the actual reality. That becomes a problem. Where I see it's going, I try to be positive. Again, I'm a little concerned of the fact that it could be very much visualization based in architecture. I think in construction, there are better opportunities in construction. At least it's not too visual. It's more practical. It can be practical. I don't know. You might know better.
Yeah, and there's a lot of drywall companies that have robots that do the layout. Yeah, they download drawing and the footprint of the space, and they just let it go. And, I think people, when you ask the question to most people, do you use AI? Invariably, you'll get a response. Yeah, I use ChatGPT every day. It helps me helps me do that. AI is much, much more than one box fits all, right? You have all these different AI versions, that specialize in certain aspects, right? If you want to
Mhm.
know, for an example, if you want to know something about a firm, you would go to Perplexity AI. There's hundreds upon hundreds of different AI models that specialize in certain things. What's the
Mhm.
most powerful thing about AI is the custom made solutions you
Mhm.
can create to give you that outcome that you're looking for, because
Mhm.
what you're looking for is not necessarily what someone else is looking for.
Exactly. Correct.
So, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
I don't know how much, I mean, I have been on this path and it's been very challenging in terms of the leadership side of things and in terms of, the architectural side as well. I don't know if, there are that many people who have gone through such an adventurous type of journey as me. But I would like to, again, raise the importance of being a leader, regardless of the, rank you have in any company, even as a, junior staff, just making sure that you speak your truth. If you see that something is not in performing or is not happening in the right way, it's important to speak up and raise that. Important to have conversations in a work environment, important to understand, particularly in the practice of architecture, instances where there's a very stressful, fearful environment, and I've experienced, when I was working at certain firms. It's important to advocate leadership instead of. I mean, we have different literatures for leadership and management, and how leadership is all about being a team player. It's all about motivating people rather than trying to control people and things and processes. And also, particularly female professionals, to be aware of their rights. It's really important to be educated enough to understand the politics of the games and not be afraid and be brave enough to stand up for themselves and also at times for other people as well. And yeah, and also that if you have that fire in you, like I think that fire has kept me alive and that's why I still keep going. If you have that fire still burning in you, about any field of profession, doesn't matter what it is, that you stay true to yourself and on that path and keep pushing. And yeah, I mean, sometimes things don't go well at all and sometimes it's really difficult, but it's also very important to be mindful of strategies. I mean, I think being smart about strategies that you can take in these very vulnerable situation phases in your life or in your profession, either as a business owner or as an employee or whatever your role is, to be able to recover from those challenges and be able to, continue and just, yeah, trying to maintain your passion. A very interesting thing, sorry, I just add this. I was invited to an executive Zoom call about leadership last week. Everyone was talking and I was talking about, all of the adventures that I've been through and, like, and I'm so passionate about this journey that, I have worked with different firms. And then one of the attendees were like, yeah, you know what? The Gen Z are like that. Like, you guys are just so passionate and you're not, it's good because you're young, you have, you have the time, but, we have a family, we have kids. And I was like, did you really think that I'm a Gen Z? That's a big mistake. So that was so funny that people associate your fire and your passion with your age. So as you get
Right.
older, as I said, I'm 40, I just turned 41 in September. As you get
Oh,
older, you cannot or you're not allowed to have that passion because you have kids. And I mean, that's a decision that you make about whether, you're ready to have a family or not. But even if you have a family, you can still be a very passionate person about what you do. So
absolutely.
yeah, that was funny.
Absolutely. Well, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for having me.